Hey, welcome to a session on AI and supply chain commerce. We're coming to you from the Momentum 2025 conference here in Las Vegas. My name is Chris Shaw. I am the Vice President of Product Marketing for Manhattan, and I've got two great guests with me, Alejandro and Sanjeev. I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Alejandro Torriello. I'm a professor of industrial engineering at Georgia Tech.
And I'm Sanjeev Siotia, CTO for Manhattan.
Okay, great. And so what we're going to do is just have a little bit of a roundtable here for 15 or 20 minutes and talk about some of the topics related, which everybody's talking about right now, really is this sort of evolution of AI. And I think that's probably, Sanjeev, where we want to start, because for so many people who are not, professors at an institute of technology or a CTO, what's the difference in AI? We hear AI, we hear Gen AI. Last year, that was all the rage. Now it's agentic AI. Maybe we can talk a little bit about what we're all hearing today, which is agents and the evolution of that. Maybe you can tell us just a little bit of what's the difference in Gen AI that we heard about last year and agents that we're all hearing about this year.
Yeah, so I use this construct in the morning a little bit for our keynote. And I use a construct of think, see, do. So when you think about Gen AI is large language models, and you give it a prompt and it'll give you a response back, right? Based on the model, however the model was built up. It'll take the knowledge in the model and give you a response. And that was great. When chatbot came out and ChatGPT came out, all of those things.
Everybody uses it,
all about that, right? You pass a prompt and it can give you an action. Now, the thing which it was missing was it was a one-turn conversation. It was kind of a stateless conversation, right? Even though it may have looked to you like a chat, but every time you put in, the whole thing was kind of going back to the model and it was responding back, looking at the whole thing.
So even though it felt like a continuous conversation, what you're saying is every time it went, it was really starting over.
Yeah, it was making it look like it is a conversation, but it was really, truly, a prompt was going every time you kind of sent the model back, you're sending the whole thing back and it's responding back. So that was kind of a single turn, if you will, right? It made it look like multi-turn. Now, when you take it to agentic AI, I said think, see, do. The think part is the LLM portion of it. The see-do part is where now you can start doing a lot more things with it, right? Where agentic AI comes in. So you can kind of start observing what's happening around your environment, what's going on with that, and then you can actually take actions, which is beyond LLM. So LLM becomes just one of the tools. So Gen AI, think of it as one tool in the overall agentic AI.
Right.
So you need other things for seeing stuff and doing stuff. And the combination of those tools and the Gen AI tool together, kind of, in my mind, that's how I kind of define agentic AI.
Okay. So in that particular case, the LLM or the large language model is what most people would equate what Gen AI or what ChatGPT or Gemini was, right? Okay. And so what you're saying is this new software construct can use that tool just like humans did over and over again, or it can go and grab other information and use that to achieve something. Yeah. And you mentioned something about it. Can you talk a little bit about, because I think the fact that it can be autonomous about this, right? I think you have to give it some parameters and it has a role like anybody working for you would, but maybe you can talk a little bit about, the roles that we anticipate them playing. Are they giant roles, or do we think they'll be small roles, and how that would work?
Given the current state of affairs, these agents work best when they have a good focus, right? So you need to kind of really constrain them, because it can get, the LLMs and everything else can get confused if you throw a whole Bible at it and say, give me whatever you want from it. So if you can put a focus on these agents, saying, okay, or LLMs for that matter, in terms of thinking, saying this is the parameters which you need to kind of answer, and then you have tooling around it, which depending on the answer can react to that answer and actually do something, right? Or figure out where does it get more data from to feed the LLM. And orchestrating that workflow and creating that workflow, essentially what makes a good agent. Yeah. Now, the good thing with this is getting out of the limitation of this focus is you can put a multi-agent system. So you can kind of really create agents. Let's say you're good at marketing and I'm good at tech and you're good at teaching. And if somebody had to kind of really, we have three agents, and somebody had to kind of create a big construct out of teach you university class, and they can use all three of us together and do something else out of it. That kind of becomes a bigger system.
Okay, so you can sort of stack the agents or compound them, wrap them.
Correct.
And you can do more
they become
complex
really,
things.
really powerful. So you kind of build your smaller agents, and then you kind of really
use the multi-agent
talk
things. To other agents. Right?
And agents can talk to other agents. That's kind of where the beauty of this thing is.
Okay. Would you say that a big difference between agents versus generative AI is description versus prescription? So the agentic AI is more capable of not just describing the state of the world to you, but doing things in it, right?
Correct.
Saying what to do and doing things in it.
Because it has access to the tools. So the LLM by themselves never can execute tools, right? LLMs were good of taking a prompt, using a model, and responding back with that, right? Now, based on the response, what do you do with it, right? So if you can kind of augment it with a set of tools, now you got an agent which can actually act on that thing, right? So LLMs kind of think of it as a brain, which does the thinking part of it, and then you got the see and do part, and you put them all together, now you got an agent, right? So in my simple construct, right? Think, say, do. Think is the LLM, and the see, do part is what makes an agent.
Right. So, okay, for somebody who's listening, who's a supply chain commerce person, one small example of what might an agent do for them? What might be a tool, a job you can give an agent?
Yeah, I mean, one example I used was load planning in the morning, right? So a load planner every morning, they come in and they have a certain sequence of things. We do planning for them, right? We tell them a whole load plan. We do the shipment planning, and we tell them exactly what the plan looks like. But every load planner still spends 2 to 3 hours just going through the stuff, because in their head, they know that when something is shipping to the zip code, it should go 3 tailors. And they want to make sure that it goes 3
They've
tailors.
They've got some tribal knowledge.
They've got tribal knowledge, which you cannot really systematically put in something.
Yeah.
But you can kind of like really, now they can translate the tribal knowledge into, hey, make sure that anything going to Raleigh, Durham, I got 3 tailors. I know there are 3 tailors every goes there. Flag it for me. And if they're not going, then pick a trailer from there and combine it. So there are things like that which you can kind of provide instructions. And now you can kind of take an observation, which is your system output of planning. Take the instruction from the load planner, combine them together, so the guy doesn't have to spend 3 hours. He can now spend 30 minutes, right? So the agent can kind of tell them, okay, I see these problems. I see that you have only one going here because you said he should go there.
So essentially, he's defining his own super assistant who's going to help him every morning with some of the tedious things, or the things that take a lot of steps, or the things that he doesn't want to do.
I'm just taking a simple example. I mean, that could be
So we've talked a little bit about Gen AI and everything else, but in the world of supply chain and logistics and all that kind of stuff, it seems like everybody just wants to talk about AI, but that's not the only math left in supply chain, right? I mean, it's the right tool for the right job sometimes, but that's not always the case, right?
Right. And I was actually thinking from what you were describing before that we have a lot of traditional computational decision support tools that you can envision as being something related to AI. Like, let's say you have an inventory policy that decides when I hit this reorder point, I'm going to order this quantity. From what I'm hearing, I guess what I would define as agentic would be the system is doing something like this, but it can observe and update these parameters based on what things look like, or it can decide to do something different. It does. It has a lot more freedom, and it can learn from the state of the system as it goes. So in some sense, you can integrate some of these new technologies with traditional decision support that we already have.
Right, and you mentioned the tools, and this is the way I like thinking about it. I almost think of the agent as a digital version of the human who is deciding which tools to use and when they need to go use them. It could be some other algorithmic tools that they need to go use and pull the lever, or it could be an LLM that they need to go pull the lever and use, right?
Yeah, people shouldn't confuse LLMs with the ML algorithms and all other kinds of algorithms we build over a period of time. Those algorithms are good, and they need to be there.
They're tried and true,
and they've been there for the last 3 years.
There's
a reason why. LLMs are good for parsing unstructured text and making some reasoning out of it. When we're just getting the reasoning part, I mean, I think only in the last 2-3 months we've got LLMs to kind of have some decent amount of reasoning in them, but they're not really necessarily the best math tools or best optimization tools, right? You need actual AI to do the optimization. Now, where the agents can play a role is invoke the right optimization tool for the right moment in time, and like you said, change the parameters sometimes. Kind of just observe what happened from it. And then tweak the parameters so that you can run the better optimization runs.
I think there's a lot of interfacing that AI can help with, because a lot of people who work in the supply chain don't have necessarily a lot of the technical expertise or the familiarity with the software that you're using or something like this. And what the AI does is it basically lets that person just talk in natural language, and then the interface is the AI. The AI goes in and looks at the model, looks at the system, and communicates back.
Right. So it's easier, faster, quicker. I don't have to learn the tool. The computer's learning my language, not the other way around.
Exactly.
Which leads me, I think, a little bit to, man, has this thing just gone so fast just in the last 2 years, and always see it as accelerating. What does this mean for organizations or companies as they're trying to figure out, how do I do this? Where do I do this? Am I going to run into any issues with governments or regulations, or just, community guidelines or anything else, anything that you've heard?
Exactly.
You know?
The technology is moving farther and faster than the regulatory environment, even just society hasn't really caught up to it. So we really don't know where this is going to end up yet. So I think we have to be a little humble about not expecting or not assuming that things are going to go a certain way, and be conservative in how we expect the technology to progress, because there's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, right. And so I think, Sanjeev, Manhattan is now, infusing. We've announced the infusion of agentic AI technologies into our Manhattan solutions. What are the biggest benefits? Like, what are the 3 or 4 areas where you would say, hey, look, these are the places where you're going to see some real tactical benefit pretty quickly from these kind of tools?
Yeah. So few you touched upon. I describe this kind of always 4 things. One is user experience. So I think the way you kind of deal with software, that's going to fundamentally start changing, because some of these systems are complex. And like you said, the user can just in a natural language interface and talk to the system and say, okay, do something. A warehouse manager doesn't have to be an expert in knowing where to find that complicated report or run an optimization thing. He just wants to say, just do
Where's
X
my
for
stuff?
me, where's my stuff? I mean, that's what he
Yeah.
wants to say. He's not trained on systems,
Right.
right? He's not trained on Manhattan. He's not trained on how to kind of operate these systems. So it'll become natural. I think, and this is beyond supply chain. I think that's a cross-wide. I would make a broad statement that'll go across
everywhere.
all our applications, right? But if you remember 2 years back when I kind of stood up, the reason I used the punch card analogy, right, as human-computer interaction, it switched from we interacting with the punch card
Right, yeah.
to
For
going to
anybody
the point where you can just kind of talk to the computer, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
a transition we kind of went
And
from.
I don't know how many people are listening or whatever. The punch card is 80 years old, right? When you paper card with holes in it, and you got to feed
that's
it
a
to the
transition.
computer.
So user experience is, I think, one
That's
area
pretty
where
bad
all
user experience.
all of us will feel
Right.
the impact of this thing,
Right.
right? Second, from our perspective, when we looked at it, is time to implement stuff, right? How do we make it faster
Right.
to implement? It goes touches upon your configuration part too a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because people kind of again know what they want from a business department perspective. They do not know our system.
Sure.
Today, when you think about it, right, what happens is somebody sits down with you and says, okay, what do you want? This is your requirement. Somebody understands that. Somebody understands the system. And there is a translator, right? I call them the translators, right? They take your business requirements and translate it back into the system. Can you cut that short with GenAI? Absolutely,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Because it can understand what you want to say,
Yeah.
and it can understand the other side of it. It can do the translation job.
And that makes sense, right? Because
So-
any elaborate, large enterprise system is going to have a lot of levers to pull.
Right. So that's the second area.
Yeah.
Third area is productivity, right? And a lot of this, which I talked about, has productivity angle, but I think everything which we'll do, end of the day, we're trying to save time, right? We're trying to help everybody to save 15 minutes of their day or 3 hours of their day and make that time shorter. So I think as we see this, we'll see productivity improvement, right? These tools, everything which they come in, they will do better things and do more productivity. And last I kind of talked about was data insights and data analytics, right? That's an area where, as the context windows of these LLMs are increasing, they will probably be able to do more. But then I mentioned to you, the reports we write, right? I mean, we used to write all kinds of reports, right? Do you want a little variation? You want summarization by product or summarization by category? You need to write 2 different reports.
Yeah.
You probably don't have to do all of those things because, again, you can naturally ask those questions and you can build this. My hope is we can build this completely dynamically, right? You can ask a question and you can still get a nice looking report with a bar chart and a pie chart and everything else which you want around it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of produced dynamically, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of another area where I think the data insights and data analytics. So those are kind of 4 immediate areas I see where this will have a reasonable impact.
That is related to productivity, right? It's the kind of thing somebody has to put all this stuff together. Every time you change one thing, you have to do it all over again.
Yeah.
you
Correct.
have to
Well,
do
And
this.
the AI has to stay, right? I just want to make sure that people understand that AI has, beyond Gen AI has a big role, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
The old algorithms, those algorithms are still required.
Yeah.
So they're not
because I
going
think
away.
most people probably don't know AI is like 6 different disciplines, right?
Yeah.
Of all of these deep, rich areas, right? And this is just one of those.
Sometimes people take this as a magic box. This is not one single
Well, that's
magic
why I said
box,
in the
right?
beginning, right? Everybody just says AI, and
Depending on who you ask, the definition varies quite a bit.
yeah, and a lot of the algorithms aren't even technically AI, right? I mean, they are other forms of mathematical stuff. So one of the other things, though, you had mentioned earlier, and it's something that Manhattan has talked about a long time, about the fact that to really unlock the value of the agents, it's going to be somewhat difficult sometimes if you're trying to do it on a legacy platform, which you're having to abstract a bunch of stuff. What are some of the reasons why you feel so confident about agents and building agents on the Manhattan Active platform? What's the difference?
Yeah, I'll go back to my construct, and I actually seem to have started growing on me the things you do, right? So the thing with this is the LLMs will give you the thinking power, right? You feed it, it can think for you. The C part, I mean, people can build data lakes, people can build data collected together, and you need a data strategy to get the data, and that'll give you the C part of it, right? The observation part of it. The hard part, and what makes an agent, is to do something. It has to act on it. It has to go change your plan, call a vendor, write an email to some. It has to be able to do all of those things. And to do all of those things, you need proper system APIs and constructs which can actually go execute. And these are system records. You don't want to mess around with them, right?
Yeah.
You don't mess around with an AI doing a bunch of stuff. You need,
it's a cache
you need,
agent of my
you
company.
need proper validations.
Right.
You need to make sure that if somebody updates this, everything is in the right state, and you don't want to mess that up because AI thought I should do this, right?
Yeah.
So you need proper, actually structured APIs which can actually go execute this stuff. And I think that's the part where I feel very confident where we are, is because we invested a lot in building these as an APIs. Because I can tell you very honestly, is when we started building this, I knew for sure that the interface of today will not be the interface of tomorrow when we were building this. Which was the reason why I kind of like was so adamant that everything has to be an API first. Because that time it was, my mind, it was Alexa and everything else kind of going around, and I was like, okay, I do not know what the interface will be, because it may not be my screen, it may be something else. So we had to kind of build a system which can work with any kind of interface going around us, right? That was the thought behind it. Now, I didn't know about Gen AI, obviously, that point of time, or any of these things. But now when I look back, it sounds great, because that's exactly what I was like, okay, I do not know what this thing is, but I know there is something else which will go interact with the system. So let's make it sure that whatever this thing is, when it comes, we are ready to interact with it. And Gen AI is just kind of like perfect example of that.
So it's the thing that landed. Alejandro, you work with the next generation of us humans who are coming up, right, at Georgia Tech. You work with these people. How are they seeing AI and seeing this next evolution? Are they excited about it? Are they worried about it? Or is this something that they're embracing and you guys are really embracing there?
Well, I think we're about to get to the point where there's a generation of AI natives, if you want to think of it as digital natives, which is what was happening a generation ago. And it's completely revolutionizing how we have to teach. So what we teach and how we teach, right? Because there's a lot of the techniques and a lot of the topics that we taught before. Why would you need to teach that to a college student when they have AI? When AI is going to be their tool as well. A lot of the repetitive tasks that sometimes we have to worry about people understanding before we can get to more fundamental knowledge, we can just pass by that, because if AI is used in the right way, an AI native is going to have the ability to lean on an assistant, an AI assistant, to do some of these things and dedicate more of their thinking, their brain power to higher order stuff. So that's, I think, a big difference.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit. My dad was a mechanical engineer, graduated in 1970, and he just raved about the Texas Instruments calculator that landed on his desk.
My daughter, no more slide rulers.
It revolutionized his life. And I think now I'm like, okay, my daughter is like using AI agents, right, or something instead. But that technology evolution is just huge, and you shift. The society shifts. Then the spreadsheet came out, right? All these things that happen, and we all kind of shift.
Yeah, I was also thinking when you guys were talking before, the way that we teach programming, which is not exactly my expertise, but I think that's going to be revolutionized also by AI, because LLM and some of these other tools can take care of a lot more of the nitty gritty of programming and developing, and have a person think more just about the structure of something. What is it doing? Versus having to think of, did I put a semicolon in the right place?
Right. So. All right. So talking about young people and I'll speak for myself, older people who are trying to get their hands around this technology and learn this. Sanjeev, how Manhattan has introduced this concept of a tool set called Manhattan Agent Foundry, but essentially is supposed to be a place where you can go and work on these agents, create these agents. But how do we, in line with this idea that it's supposed to be simpler and easier, and these agents are supposed to be easier, when someone wants to sit down and build an agent or develop an agent, what are the things that we're doing to make that an easier process than, say, the traditional, I've got to go learn a programming language and write some code and write an extension? How is working and building and creating agents going to be different than what people maybe have done in the past when they would?
So one thing we have done over a period of time that we kind of learned through, from a tooling perspective, we have done a lot of work around how do you build your agents. And we kind of provided a way where you can build your agents from a template, for example, right? A pre-built agent, you can just go modify something. We've also given you tools to actually create this from scratch. Now, the good thing about this, like I go back to my API thing, end of the day, you're kind of like, essentially, if I simplify this a lot, you're calling APIs and you're calling LLMs, and you're coordinating the sequence of those things. And hopefully the output of the LLM describes the sequence of which API to call, right? and you put them together. So we have actually created an agent which can actually do this for you. You can describe to the agent, this is what I want to build, and it will build an agent for you.
Agent that builds agents? Okay.
Yes. So it's
sounds
kind of
easy.
like,
Yeah.
So we kind of even done that for you to make it easy.
Yeah.
And the second thing I would say is, I mean, don't be afraid, just get your feet wet, right?
Okay.
There's no way to learn. If you want to swim, you have to get in the water and get your feet wet and start swimming, right? So to some extent, we're kind of giving you all the tool set, but just embrace it, go on it, and try it.
Yeah, right.
I think an important
You
question.
won't break because the APIs are your kind of guardrails, so you won't break anything. Don't worry about breaking something. Just start using agents. You're using APIs. If something is wrong, the APIs will stop you from doing the bad stuff.
Okay.
An important question here is interpretability. I think that's something else that is going to help convince more people that AI is a useful and a safe tool. What I mean by that is the fact that more and more of these models are now being trained to tell you why they decided to do something or why they came to the conclusion that they came to. And so have it be less of a black box and have it be more understandable for people. That really builds trust.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think everybody's hard at work trying to bring that thing. It's just been one challenge with a lot of these models is that they're kind of really, truly black boxes right now. So everybody's trying to open that box up and say, okay, why is this doing something?
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting part is finding that balance, because as we started today and talking about AI gets this umbrella term and everybody's just like, oh, that's the AI. But it's significantly more refined and differentiated as we get down into it. So you're constantly trying to balance this simplicity. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible so it's easy to use with there's some real work going on under there, right, to try and make sure these things are there and that they're right.
I mean, the hardest part is with computers, we always were very predictable. You input A and you get an output B. The Gen AI kind of twists that model around because the input A doesn't always result in B. You can get different outcomes, and you have to kind of really figure out how to deal with different outcomes.
Change one letter and get a totally different thing.
Yeah, you can completely different.
Right.
So that's kind of really very different about Gen AI versus anything else we have done before with computer science. Because if your input is the same, your output will be exactly the same, right? It is always, and which is why it kind of comes back to, okay, what happened? Why is my output different?
Right. So I think we only have about a minute left. Is there anything else, anything we haven't talked about that comes to mind for either of you guys when you just think about if somebody's getting started with AI or thinking about AI, what you might leave them with, a thought you might leave them with?
I think I agree that it helps to just play around with a system and see what it does and get familiar with it. I think getting comfortable with it
Don't
helps.
be afraid of it, right?
Yeah, helps a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of echo the same thing. Just don't be afraid of it. I mean, one thing for sure, right? I mean, there are, at least my 30 plus years in technology, there have been a bunch of inflection points, and I think almost all of them we could kind of see very clearly. The internet when it came, the mobile when it came in 2007, right? The cloud transition when it happened, and this, right? There are a lot of other technologies which came in between, and we all kind of knew there was a lot of noise around it, buzzwords around it, but they were never kind of like, okay, we knew it'll have some traction, but this is a very clear
delineation.
Clear delineation that this is the technology which we all will have to embrace, whether we like it or not. It will be in our lives.
Yeah.
So we better kind of get used to it, figure out how to play with it, and get comfortable with it, right? Because there is no way around this thing.
All right. Well, thank you both. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for AI and Supply Chain Commerce from Momentum 2025.
Thank you.